Mark chapter 8. Jesus feed the 4,000. Verse 1. During those days, another largest crowd gathered. Since they have nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, verse 2, I have compassion for those people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to. Verse 3, if I send them whom hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. Verse 4, his disciple answered, but will in this remote place can anyone get enough bread of the earth to feed them? Verse 5, how many left do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. Verse 6, he told the crowd to sit on the ground when he had taken the 7 loaves and give thanks. He broke them, and give to them to his disciples to set before the people, and they did so. Verse 7, they have a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute. Verse 8, the people ate and were satisfied. After the disciple picked up 7 buckets of broken pieces that were left over. Verse 9, about 4,000 men were present, and having sent them away. Verse 10, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the largest of Damanuta. Verse 11, the Pharisees comes and began to question Jesus to test him. They asking him for a sign for heaven. Verse 12, he sighs deeply and say, why does this generation ask for a miraculous sign? I told you the truth. No sign will be given to it. Verse 13, then he left them, go back into the boat, and called to the other side. The judge of the Pharisees and Herod. Verse 14, the disciples have forgotten to bring bread, except for one left they have with them in the boat. Verse 15, be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yields of the Pharisees and death of Herod. Verse 16, they discussed this with one another and said, this is because we have no bread. Verse 17, the words of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your heart hardened? Verse 18, do you have eye but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And then as you remember, verse 19, when I broke the 5 loaves for 5,000, how many baskets full of pieces do you pick it up? 12, they replied. Verse 20, then when I broke the 7 bread for 4,000, how many baskets full of pieces did you pick it up? They answered, 7. Verse 21, he said to them, do you still not understand? The healing of blind at Bethsaida. Verse 22, they come to Bethsaida, and some people bought a blind man and began Jesus to touch him. Verse 23, he touched the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hand on it, Jesus asked him, do you see anything? Verse 24. He looked up and said, I see people, they look like a tree walking along. Verse 25. One more Jesus put his hand on the man's eye. Then his eye was opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Verse 26. Jesus sent him home, saying, do not go into the village. Peter confession of Jesus. Verse 27, Jesus and his disciple went on to the village around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, who do people say I am? Verse 28, they reply, some say John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. Verse 29, but what about you? He asked him, who do you say I am? Peter answered, you are the Christ. Verse 30, Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Jesus predicted his death. Verse 31, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elder, chief priests, and teacher of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise. Again, verse 32, he spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Verse 33, but when Jesus turned and looked at his disciple, he rebuked Peter, get behind me, Satan. He said, you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of man. Verse 34, then he called the crowd to him round with his disciples and said, if anyone would come up to me, he must deny himself and keep up his cross and follow me. Verse 35, for whoever went to save his life will lose it, but whoever lost his life for me and for the gospel will save it. Verse 36, what good it is for a man to gain the world's world, just fulfilled his soul. Verse 37, all, what can the man give in exchange for his soul? Verse 38, if anyone is ashamed of me and my walk in this adultery and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angel. Mark chapter 8, verse 2, I have compassion. Jesus was filled with compassion for the needs and the sufferings of humanity. Chapter 1, verse 41, Jesus is still mocked today with a deep and illness sympathy for the needs and hearts of its children of God. This assures us that in our troubles, we can come to Him in prayer in order to receive grace, mercy, and help. Matthew chapter 6, verse 31 to 33. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4 to 16. Chapter 7, verse 25. Mark chapter 8, verse 15. Jesus. In the New Testament, Jesus is using a symbolic figure called corruption. Matthew chapter 13, verse 33, chapter 16, verse 6, 11, Luke chapter 12, verse 1, and 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6 to 7, 13 chapter 5, verse 9. A small amount of Jesus' world, famines and affect the world. Number one, the Jesus of the Pharisees refer to their preference from human imitates idea over the comments and righteousness of God. Chapter 7, verse 5 to 8. Number 2, the years of Herod is identical with that the death of the Sadducee. It referred to a spirit of secularism and worldliness. Matthew chapter 3, verse 7. Follower of Christ must always guide again, accepting the views of those who push human idea and biblical tradition and secular humanistic sides of gospel. To accept the gist of Herod will cast the church to trans against Christ and his work. Mark chapter 8, verse 25. His sight was restored. This healing in Bethsaida is the only instance of a gradual cast by Jesus. It's that no every healing has to be is the statement for in some cases the victory of divine power over sickness will be gradual. Gradual. Mark chapter 8, verse 34. Take off his cross. The cross of Christ is the symbol of suffering. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21, chapter 4, verse 13, death. Acts chapter 10, verse 39, shame. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, ridiculed. Matthew chapter 27, verse 39, and rejection. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, and self-denial. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. When we as believers take up our cross and follow Christ, we deny our own self. Luke chapter 14, verse 26 to 27, and commit ourselves to three areas of study and suffering. Number one, we suffer in the right round, better against sin. Romans chapter 6, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1 to 2, and by crucifying our own sinful desire. Romans chapter 6, Romans chapter 8, verse 13, and 13 chapter 2, verse 20, chapter 6, verse 20, chapter 6, verse 14, and Titus chapter Titus chapter 2 verse 12 and First Peter chapter 2 verse 11, chapter 21 verse 24. Number 2, we suffer in the world against Satan and the power of darkness as we advance the kingdom of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 4 to 5 and chapter 6 verse 7 and Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12. First Timothy chapter 6 verse 12, and we experience both the hostility of the adversary with his demonic hordes. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 3 to 7 and chapter 11 verse 22 to 29 and First Peter chapter 5 verse 8 to 10, and the persecutions that come from standing against false teachers who disallow the true gospel. Matthew chapter 23 verse 1 to 36 and Corinthians chapter 1 verse 9, and Philemon, Philippians chapter 1 verse 1 to 15 to 17. Number 3, we suffer the hardest and radicals of the world. John chapter 15 verse 18 to 25 and Hebrew chapter 11 verse 25 to 26, by testifying in love that it that are evil. John chapter 7 verse 7, by separations ourselves for its both morality and spirituality. See the articles on spiritual separation for a believer, page number 371, and by refusing to accept its standard old philosophy as our own. Mark chapter 8 verse 38, ashamed of me and my world. Yes, in the world and society in which we live as and adultery, a sinful generations, all those who said to be popular in all, accepted by the present evil generation, later dance follow Christ, and his righteous standards will be rejected by Christ at his return. Matthew chapter 7 verse 23 and chapter 25 verse 41 to 44, 46. Luke chapter 9 verse 26. Chapter 13 verse 27.